Ready to go. Babe. The entire lobby went silent the moment Lydia kissed my cheek. My ex-wife had walked into the Riverside Gala with her new fiancé just to remind me that, in her story, I was still the man she left behind. She smiled like she had won. He looked at me like I was beneath the room. But neither of them knew his sister was the woman holding my hand now. And they definitely didn't know the project file in my briefcase could destroy the lie they had built their future on. My ex walked into the Riverside Alumni Gala, holding her new fiancé's hand like she had dragged in a trophy. She saw me near the registration table, smiled slowly, and turned him toward me on purpose. 10 minutes later, after she had introduced him as the upgrade, his sister crossed the marble lobby, kissed my cheek in front of everyone, and said, "Ready to go." Babe, that was the first time I saw panic crack through my ex-wife's perfect face. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 34 years old, a project estimator for a small construction firm in Columbus, Ohio. And for 3 years I had been the kind of man people politely forgot was in the room. Not because I was quiet by nature, but because my divorce from Vanessa Cole had turned me into a cautionary story. I was the husband who got left, the man who lost the house, the fool who supposedly couldn't keep up with a woman like her. Vanessa had a talent for making cruelty sound like self-improvement. When she left, she did not say she had fallen out of love. She said she had outgrown small thinking. She said I was kind, dependable, and safe, which sounded like compliments until she stacked them together like bricks around my throat. Her favorite sentence, the one she repeated to friends until it became the official version, was, "Daniel was never a bad man. He was just never going anywhere." That sentence followed me everywhere. It showed up in the pauses at dinner invitations, in the careful smiles from people who used to call us a power couple, in the way men from her new circle clapped my shoulder too hard and asked how work was down at the job site. They never cared about the answer. They cared that I was still standing somewhere below them, where Vanessa had placed me. The strange thing was, I had helped build the life she later used to humiliate me. When we married at 26, Vanessa was working front desk at a boutique marketing agency, and I was running estimates out of a borrowed office with fluorescent lights that buzzed when it rained. I proofread her pitches, paid half her certification courses, built her first client spreadsheet, and spent nights reheating dinner because she was one meeting away from her big break. I never resented her ambition. I admired it. I used to watch her stand in front of the bathroom mirror before presentations, practicing hand gestures with a toothbrush in one hand and mascara wand in the other. And I would think, there she is. My wife. My storm. I believed marriage meant taking turns carrying the heavier end. For a long time, I thought I was carrying it because love required strength, not because she had quietly stopped lifting. By the second year, Vanessa had learned a new language. She started saying optics when she meant embarrassment. She said alignment when she meant obedience. She said partnership when she meant my money, my labor, my time, and her name on the final result. If I questioned a late night with a client, she called me insecure. If I asked why she introduced me as in construction instead of by my actual title, she laughed and said I was being sensitive. The night she asked for a divorce, she did it over salmon at a restaurant I had saved for 3 months to afford. She wore the emerald dress I bought her for our 5th anniversary and kept checking her reflection in the window behind me. I remember the candle between us. I remember the waiter approaching with dessert, seeing her face, and turning around. I remember Vanessa folding her napkin with surgical calm before saying, "I need a life that doesn't feel like settling." I did not yell. That bothered her. I think she wanted a scene she could retell later with herself as the composed survivor and me as the angry small-town husband who proved her point. Instead, I sat there with my hands under the table, pressing my thumbnail into my palm until the pain gave me something clean to focus on. Then I asked the only question that came out. "Is there someone else?" She looked almost offended. "That's such a predictable question," she said. Then she leaned back and gave me the answer without giving me the dignity of a name. There are people who see my potential. Daniel. That's all I'll say. Later. I learned one of those people was a senior partner at a branding firm. Later still. I learned there had been more than one. But that night, she let me walk home in February, wind, believing my failure had been too much love and not enough shine. Divorce made everyone reveal themselves in practical ways. My brother offered his couch for exactly 12 days. Then asked when I was getting serious about moving forward. Vanessa's friends unfollowed me before the paperwork was signed. Her mother sent a text that said she hoped I would grow from this. The only person who never treated me like a failed investment was my friend Marcus, who owned a cabinet shop and once told me, "People like her don't leave rooms. They leave witnesses." I rented a one-bedroom above a pharmacy with pipes that knocked at night. I bought mismatched plates from a thrift store and learned that silence after a marriage is not peace at first. It is noise with no furniture. There were evenings I stood in the kitchen holding a single coffee mug, furious that no one had prepared me for the humiliation of starting over without an audience, without applause, without anyone checking whether I was still breathing. What saved me was work. Not romance. Not revenge. Work. I had always been good with numbers, contracts, scope gaps, and the quiet places where people hid expensive mistakes. My boss began sending me into messy projects because I could read a bid package like a confession. I found missing change orders, inflated supplier quotes, duplicate labor charges, and one beautiful little fraud buried under miscellaneous site conditions that saved a nonprofit nearly $80,000. That nonprofit was the Riverside Housing Trust. And that was how I met Lydia Hart. She was 29, sharp-eyed, dark-haired, and dressed like someone who had stopped asking permission to be taken seriously. She was the trust's legal liaison on the project. Though I did not know at first that her family name was attached to half the donor plaques in the city. I only knew she listened when I explained the numbers, asked better questions than the men in suits, and never once looked at my work boots like they were a character flaw. Lydia and I did not happen like lightning. We happened like a door, slowly realizing it had not been locked. She called me about contract language. I called her about a supplier discrepancy. Then we argued over takeout in a conference room about whether a porch restoration should preserve original railings or use safer modern replacements. She won that argument. I paid for the dumplings. 6 months later, she knew my coffee order, my divorce story, and exactly which silences meant I was remembering something I wished I could forget. We kept our relationship private because she asked to, and I respected it. Her family was complicated. Her brother was newly engaged, and the Hart name made people behave strangely around her. I understood complicated. I understood being treated as an accessory in someone else's public story. So when Lydia said, "I want us to be ours, before anyone turns it into theirs," I said okay. I did not ask her to prove me off in public. I had been someone's prop before. I never wanted to make another person mine. The Riverside Alumni Gala was supposed to be simple. The trust was receiving an award for the housing project. My firm had donated labor, and I was asked to stand near the model display in case donors had technical questions. I wore a navy suit, Marcus insisted, made me look less like a haunted accountant. I arrived early, checked the display lights, adjusted the donor cards, and told myself the evening would be boring in the safest possible way. Then Vanessa appeared beneath the chandeliers with a diamond on her finger and a man at her side whose face I recognized from Lydia's family photos. Preston Hart, her new fiancé, Lydia's older brother, the man whose engagement Lydia had mentioned with that careful tone people use when love and disappointment share a last name. Vanessa saw me recognize him, and her smile widened like she had been waiting months for that exact second. She guided Preston straight toward me. Not accidentally, not politely. She crossed the lobby with the patience of someone carrying a match to dry paper. "Daniel," she said, bright enough for nearby donors to turn. "What a surprise. I didn't realize you'd be working tonight." Preston glanced at my name badge. then at the model display, and gave me the soft, careless smile of a man who had never had to wonder if a room would let him belong. "I'm here with the project team," I said. My voice stayed even, but my body remembered her before my mind could stop it. The old tightening across my chest, the instinct to make myself smaller so she would not sharpen herself against me. Vanessa placed a hand on Preston's arm and tilted her head. "Of course. Daniel was always very helpful behind the scenes," she said. "He's good at support roles." Preston chuckled because he thought she had given him permission. "That's valuable," he said. "Not everyone needs to be front-facing." People nearby pretended not to listen while listening completely. I looked at Vanessa's ring, at Preston's expensive watch, at the donor wall behind them, and understood the shape of what she had planned. She had not come to the gala to celebrate housing. She had come to show me the life she believed I had been too small to enter. I could have walked away. The old Daniel would have swallowed the insult and called it maturity, then gone home and replayed every sentence until dawn. But before I could decide whether silence was dignity or surrender, a voice behind Preston said, "There you are." Lydia stepped between two board members, calm as a closing argument, her black dress catching the chandelier light. She walked right past her brother, kissed my cheek, and smiled, ready to go. "Babe." For half a second, the whole lobby forgot how to breathe. Vanessa's eyes moved from Lydia's hand on my arm to the place Lydia had kissed my cheek, then back to my face, searching for the trick. Preston's smile collapsed first. He looked at his sister like she had broken a rule written somewhere only rich families could see. I did not move. I let Lydia's fingers settle into mine, warm and steady. Because for the first time in years, someone had stood beside me without asking me to shrink. "Lydia," Preston said, and his voice carried warning under the polish. "What are you doing?" Lydia looked at him with that calm I had seen across conference tables when contractors tried to bury bad language in small print. "Greeting my boyfriend," she said. "Is that confusing?" Vanessa laughed once. But it landed wrong. Too sharp and too late. "Boyfriend," she repeated, as if the word had been dragged in off the street. "Daniel didn't mention he was seeing anyone." "That's because Daniel doesn't use relationships as press releases," Lydia said. Her tone was soft enough to be called polite and precise enough to cut. A donor near the model display looked down into her wineglass like the answer might be hiding there. I felt every old humiliation inside me rise and look for a place to go. Vanessa had spent years telling people I was not enough. Lydia did not argue with the rumor. She simply stood close enough to make the rumor look ridiculous. Preston's face had gone stiff in a way I recognized from men who were used to managing rooms with money. "This is inappropriate," he said. "Tonight is about the trust." Lydia tilted her head. "Then maybe don't let your fiancé use it to insult the estimator who found the overbilling issue that kept the East Wing funded." That was when Vanessa's expression flickered. Not fear yet. Calculation. She had not known that part. She had assumed I was still just near the edges. Useful but invisible. Carrying pieces of a world she wanted to enter. I could have enjoyed it. A meaner version of me wanted to. But the truth is, I mostly felt tired. Tired of watching Vanessa adjust her mask depending on the audience. Tired of Preston's easy entitlement. Tired of the sudden awareness that my private life and Lydia's family problem had collided under chandeliers in front of donors who loved nothing more than a quiet scandal. I squeezed Lydia's hand once. Not to stop her, but to remind both of us there was a life outside that room. Vanessa recovered by touching Preston's lapel. "I'm sorry," she said, turning her smile toward the small circle that had formed. "I had no idea Daniel was involved with your sister." "What a funny little city," she said, funny the way some people say unfortunate. Then she looked at me with that intimate cruelty only former spouses know how to aim. "I hope you're being careful, Lydia. Daniel can be very devoted. But sometimes, devotion becomes dependence." There it was. The old knife. Polished for company. In our marriage, Vanessa had called my loyalty suffocating whenever it inconvenienced her, and invisible whenever she needed it. Now she offered that lie to Lydia like a warning label. My jaw tightened. But I did not answer quickly. That mattered. Years earlier, silence had meant I was swallowing poison. That night, silence meant I was choosing where to place the blade. Lydia answered before I did. Dependable isn't the insult you think it is. Then she turned to me. We should check the display before the award presentation. It was a graceful exit. And I took it. We walked away from them slowly. Not rushed. Not wounded. Not like people escaping. Behind us, I heard Vanessa whisper something to Preston. And I heard the rough edge in his reply. I did not catch the words. I caught the tone. They had come to make me uncomfortable and found themselves standing inside a story they did not control. At the model table, Lydia released my hand only to straighten one of the donor cards. Her fingers trembled once. Barely visible. Then stilled. I should have warned you, she said. About Preston and Vanessa. I looked at the tiny scale porches. The painted windows. The miniature people glued permanently to sidewalks. You didn't know she was my ex until last month, I said. And you asked if I wanted to talk about it. I said no. That was true. Pride can look a lot like privacy when you are not ready to bleed in front of someone kind. Lydia nodded. But her eyes stayed on the model. Preston thinks every person in his life is a board position he can fill or replace. Vanessa fits the image he wants right now. Polished. Ambitious. Grateful to be chosen. The last words carried history. I wanted to ask what Preston had done to her. But the gala bell chimed, calling guests into the ballroom. And she stepped back into public composure like a coat. The award presentation should have been harmless. Speeches. Applause. Oversized check. Photos no one would print. Instead, Vanessa and Preston turned it into theater. They sat at the front table with the Hart family. Directly under the soft gold lights. Where every camera could find them. I stood with my firm near the side wall. Close enough to hear the MC praise the trust. The donors. The volunteers. And the visionary leadership that made community restoration possible. My name was not in the program. I had not expected it to be. Then Preston took the microphone. He had not been scheduled to speak. Lydia's shoulders went rigid beside me. Her mother, Elaine Hart, smiled with practiced surprise from the front table, which told me the surprise was for the audience. Preston thanked the donors. Thanked the board. Thanked Vanessa for teaching him what forward motion looks like. And then said he and Vanessa wanted to make a personal announcement. A ripple went through the room. Vanessa lowered her eyes like a bride in a painting. We've decided, Preston said, to hold our engagement celebration here next month. As a benefit evening for Riverside Housing Trust. Applause rose immediately, because people with money are trained to clap at generosity before asking, who pays for the napkins? Vanessa stood. Shining. Preston lifted her hand. Her ring flashed across the room. And her gaze found mine over the heads of strangers. She did not smile broadly. She didn't need to. Her face said, see, I belong here now. I thought that would be the worst of it. Then Preston added, and I hope everyone will support Vanessa as she helps us modernize the Trust's outreach strategy. She has a rare gift for turning quiet work into visible impact. Quiet work. The phrase moved through me like cold water. Around me. People clapped again. Lydia did not. She stared at her brother with the expression of someone watching him step onto thin ice while admiring his shoes. After the speeches, Vanessa approached me near the hallway leading to the coat room. She came alone this time, though I could see Preston a few yards behind her speaking with Elaine. I owe you an apology, she said. For one foolish second, some bruised part of me listened. Then she continued. I didn't realize Lydia was serious about you. Preston says she goes through these little phases when she wants to prove she's different from the family. She touched my sleeve with 2 fingers. Don't let yourself become part of a rebellion you don't understand. I looked at her hand until she removed it. You don't know anything about my relationship, I said. Vanessa's eyes softened in that rehearsed way that once made me doubt my own memory. I know you, Daniel. You like being needed. It makes you feel chosen. That's why we lasted as long as we did. She leaned closer. But Lydia Hart is not some ordinary woman who needs rescuing. When this ends, her family will still be her family. You'll just be the mistake she made to upset them. It should not have hurt. By then, I knew her methods. She took whatever was sacred to you and turned it into evidence against you. Still, pain has muscle memory. My chest tightened before my mind could defend itself. I thought about the restaurant, the emerald dress, the candle. I thought about walking home in February while she let me believe I had been too small to love properly. For a moment, I was back there, hands freezing in my coat pockets, wondering how a person could leave and still take all the warmth in the world with them. Then Lydia appeared at the end of the hall. She did not rush. She did not raise her voice. Vanessa, she said. My mother wants a photo with you and Preston. Vanessa turned, transformed instantly. Of course. Before she left, she gave me one last look. Take care of yourself, Daniel. You always did need someone to remind you. Then she walked away. Heels clicking against marble like punctuation, Lydia waited until Vanessa was gone. What did she say? I almost lied. Not because I wanted to protect Vanessa, but because humiliation feels cleaner when no one else touches it. Instead, I told Lydia the exact words. She listened without interrupting. And when I finished, she looked toward the ballroom doors. That sounds like Vanessa, she said. And it sounds like Preston. She took a slow breath. They're going to use this benefit to push her deeper into the trust. Can they? I asked. Lydia's mouth tightened. If my mother allows it? Yes. Preston has influence. Vanessa has image. Together, they can make a very shiny mess. She glanced back at the ballroom. But there's something they don't know. I waited. She looked at me. And for the first time that night, her calm had anger under it. The outreach contract Vanessa wants to touch is tied to the same project file you corrected. The file with the overbilling notes. I knew exactly which file she meant. 3 months earlier, I had found duplicated supplier charges in the preliminary outreach renovation package, buried under 2 subcontractor layers and 1 vague consulting line. The correction had not just saved money, it had quietly protected the trust from approving a contract that would have benefited a company connected to Preston's old fraternity friend. Lydia had asked me to document every change, every email, every timestamp. I had done it out of habit. Numbers do not care who is embarrassed by them. Does Preston know I kept copies? I asked. Lydia shook her head. No. He thinks it was handled internally. Then she looked past me at Vanessa laughing beneath the chandelier. Already practicing the role of charitable future daughter-in-law. And Vanessa definitely doesn't know the first person she mocked tonight is the person whose notes can explain why her fiancé's pet vendor was removed from the project. The sentence settled between us quietly. Heavy as a locked drawer. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt the seriousness of it. Evidence changes things, only if you are willing to survive what happens after you reveal it. Preston was not just Vanessa's fiancé. He was Lydia's brother. Elaine's son. A heart in a room that treated that name like currency. Vanessa had chosen a powerful family because she understood power as protection. But power had made her careless. She believed the people beneath her did not keep records. We left the gala before dessert. In the parking garage, Lydia leaned against my truck and closed her eyes for 3 seconds. I'm sorry she did that to you, she said. I'm sorry my brother helped. I unlocked the doors, then paused. I'm not sorry you kissed me, I said. She opened her eyes. And for the first time all night, she smiled like herself. Good, she said. Because I wasn't asking per. On the drive home, Columbus blurred by in streaks of white and red. Lydia held her shoes in her lap, tired enough to be quiet. And I thought about how strange it was to be defended in public and still feel the bruise afterward. Healing does not erase old pain on command. Sometimes it just gives you a witness who refuses to let the pain rewrite the facts. When I dropped Lydia at her townhouse, she kissed me again. Softer this time. And said, "Tomorrow, we talk about the file." I went home to the apartment above the pharmacy, hung my suit on the closet door, and opened the old project folder on my laptop. There it was, emails, bid comparisons, vendor substitutions, time-stamped notes, and the spreadsheet where Preston's preferred contractor had tried to pass duplicate charges through a nonprofit housing budget. I did not know yet whether I would need any of it. I only knew Vanessa had stepped back into my life wearing a ring that connected her to the one family whose secrets were already sitting in my hard drive. At Deutsche Pressetje, Ops Pressetje. M. My phone lit up, with a text from an unknown number. For a second, I thought it might be Vanessa. It was worse. The message was from Preston Hart. It said, "Stay away from my sister. And stay out of family business." I sat at my kitchen table, the project folder glowing on the screen, and read those words twice. Then I saved the message in the same folder as everything else. The next morning, Preston's text still sat at the top of my phone like a dare. I read it while coffee burned in the pot behind me and the pipes knocked in the wall. Stay away from my sister. Stay out of family business. Men like Preston used the word family the way other men used offense. It sounded protective from far away. But up close, it was built to keep certain people out and certain secrets in. I did not answer him. That was the first choice. The second was forwarding the screenshot to Lydia before I could talk myself into minimizing it. She called within 2 minutes. "He texted you directly?" she asked. Her voice was controlled. But I knew control by then. It is not the absence of anger. It is anger with its shoes on. "Yeah," I said. "After midnight." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Good." He put it in writing. We met at a small breakfast place near German Village, where the tables were too close together, and the waitress called everyone, "Honey." Lydia arrived with her hair still damp, a canvas tote over one shoulder, and the expression of someone who had slept badly but decided not to be fragile about it. She slid into the booth across from me and placed a folder between us. Not dramatic. Not heavy. Just a plain blue folder with a white label that read, "Riverside Outreach Vendor Review." "I need you to understand something," she said. "Preston doesn't just dislike you because of me. He dislikes you because you saw a mistake he thought would stay invisible." I opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, procurement notes, board memos, and a vendor map showing relationships between contractors, consultants, and donors. I recognized the numbers immediately. My estimates, my correction notes, my time-stamped comments in the margins, printed like little pieces of a buried argument. Lydia tapped one page with her finger. This company, Northline, Strategic Media, was supposed to handle community outreach for the renovated housing units. They subcontracted part of the work to a firm called Ashford Civic. Ashford is owned by Grant Bell, Preston's friend from college. I scanned the page. The duplicate charges were under Ashford. She nodded. And Vanessa's agency has been trying to partner with Northline for months. Her engagement to Preston suddenly makes that much easier. There it was. The shape under the surface. Vanessa had not just brought Preston to taunt me. She had walked into a nonprofit gala attached to a man whose family could deliver the kind of polished reputation she wanted. And possibly the contract access she needed. Maybe she loved him. Maybe she loved what his name opened. With Vanessa, affection and opportunity had always known how to share a room. Lydia's face hardened when I said that out loud. Preston told my mother Vanessa could modernize the trust. He said our outreach looked dated and too local. My mother loves phrases like that. They make bad ideas sound expensive. She leaned back. The board is voting next week on whether to authorize a planning committee for the benefit and review outside communications proposals. If Vanessa gets placed anywhere near that committee, she'll use it as a launch pad. Why does Preston care so much? I asked. Lydia looked out the window for a moment, watching traffic move past wet pavement. Because Preston has always needed to be the smartest man in the room. Even when he's wrong. Especially then. When you found the billing issue. He told my mother it was an accounting misunderstanding. If the full vendor trail comes out, it won't look like a misunderstanding. It will look like influence. I knew what she was asking before she asked it. Not because she wanted revenge, but because truth has a way of needing witnesses. You want the full file ready for the board? I said. Lydia nodded. Only if they push. I'm not trying to destroy my brother. I'm trying to stop him from handing Vanessa a key to a door she'll pretend she built. The words stayed with me. A key to a door. Maybe that was what Vanessa had wanted all along. In every room she entered. For 2 days. I worked after hours assembling the cleanest version of the file. Not a pile of accusations. A timeline. Dates. Names. Contract revisions. Vendor substitutions. And every place the numbers changed after Preston's preferred recommendation moved through the chain. I included my original estimate, the revised bid, the duplicate charges, and the email where Grant Bell wrote, "Preston said this can be smoothed out before board review." That sentence mattered. It was not a smoking gun. It was smoke under a locked door. Lydia reviewed everything with the discipline of someone used to family members calling facts disloyal. She marked places where wording needed to be neutral. She removed anything that sounded emotional. This has to be boring. She said. Boring is credible. I almost laughed because nothing about it felt boring to me. Every document reminded me that Vanessa had once mocked the same skill, now protecting the project she wanted to enter. My tearfulness. My habit of keeping receipts. My refusal to call a number clean just because someone powerful preferred it that way. On Thursday evening, Vanessa called me. I watched her name appear on the screen and felt the old reflex flare in my stomach. Some people do not have to touch you to prove they still know where the bruise is. I let it ring until voicemail. 30 seconds later, the transcript appeared. Daniel, we should talk before things become awkward. I'd hate for Lydia to get hurt because you're still processing old feelings. Call me. I saved the voicemail. Then I sent it to Lydia. She replied with 3 words. Do not engage. I didn't. That night, Vanessa texted from her own number. I know you think Lydia choosing you means something. Please don't confuse her rebellion with love. Then another. Preston is protective for a reason. Then a third. After midnight. You always did need a woman to give you direction. I saved all of them. Not because they were illegal, but because patterns matter. By Friday, the story had begun moving without us. A photo from the gala appeared on a Lower Society page, Preston and Vanessa, smiling under the headline. Hart family announces benefit engagement celebration. In the corner of the same photo, half cut off near the model display, Lydia's hand was on my arm. People noticed. Vanessa made sure they did. Someone tagged me. Someone commented. Small world. Someone else wrote, "Isn't that Vanessa's ex? The internet has a gift for turning pain into sport." Marcus saw it and called during my lunch break. "Tell me you're not reading comments," he said. "I'm not reading comments. I lead." He exhaled. "Listen to me. You don't win by wrestling pigs in public. You win by keeping your boots clean and your paperwork cleaner." That was Marcus. Turning wisdom into something you could hang in a shop next to clamps. But he was right. I closed the page, opened the vendor timeline, and added the social post to a separate folder labeled Public Narrative. The board meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at the Hart Foundation offices downtown. Lydia asked me to attend as a project consultant, not as her boyfriend. That distinction mattered. If I entered as the man dating Preston's sister, I became a distraction. If I entered as the estimator who documented the vendor issue, I became a fact. Vanessa understood image. Lydia understood process. I was beginning to understand that process, when used calmly, could beat image, because image hates being asked for documentation. On Monday night, Preston called me from a blocked number. I knew it was him the moment he spoke. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. No greeting. No pretense. I put him on speaker and opened a blank note. "What exactly am I making harder?" I asked. He laughed softly. "Don't play dumb. Lydia told me you're coming tomorrow. You don't belong in that meeting." My hand stayed still over the keyboard. "The trust asked my firm for project documentation. The trust is my family," he said. "No," I replied, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "The trust is a nonprofit with a board, bylaws, donors, and residents waiting on finished units." The silence on the line sharpened. Then he said, "You think because Lydia is entertaining this little blue-collar recovery fantasy, you have leverage?" There it was. Not just contempt. Fear wearing a tailored suit. I typed his words as closely as I could while he spoke. He told me Vanessa had warned him I could be emotionally manipulative. He said I was using Lydia to get back at my ex-wife. He said if I embarrassed him in front of the board, he would make sure every firm in the donor network knew I was unstable, resentful, and unprofessional. That last word amused me in a grim way. Unprofessional. From a man making threats over a blocked line at 9:42 p.m. When he paused, I said, "Preston, I'm going to give you one chance to hear this clearly. I will answer questions about the project file tomorrow. I will not discuss Lydia with you. I will not discuss Vanessa. And I will not be threatened out of a meeting where I have relevant documentation." He breathed into the phone for 2 seconds. "You're going to regret this," he said. Then he hung up. My hands shook after the call ended. That annoyed me. I wanted strength to feel like stone, but it often felt like shaking and doing the right thing anyway. I saved the call log, wrote a summary while the words were fresh, and sent it to Lydia. She called immediately. "Are you okay?" she asked. I looked around my small kitchen. At the thrift store plates, the laptop, the folder, the life Vanessa once treated like evidence of failure. "I'm not okay," I said. "But I'm steady." Tuesday morning, I wore the navy suit again. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because it fit, and because Marcus had been right about it making me look less haunted. I printed 3 copies of the timeline and put them in a black portfolio. The physical weight of the pages steadied me. Evidence is not magic. It does not erase humiliation, but it gives truth a body. It gives the quiet person something to place on the table besides pain. The Hart Foundation offices occupied the 21st floor of a glass building overlooking the river. The lobby smelled like lemon polish and expensive restraint. Lydia met me near the elevators. She wore a gray suit, pearl earrings, and the same calm expression she had worn at the gala. But when we were alone for 3 seconds, she touched my wrist. "Thank you for coming," she said. I nodded. "Thank you for not treating me like a scandal." Her eyes softened. "Daniel, you were never the scandal." Inside the conference room, Preston stood near the head of the table with Vanessa beside him. She looked flawless in cream, like a woman auditioning for trust. Elaine Hart sat at the center. Silver hair swept back, hands folded over the agenda. Several board members greeted Lydia warmly. A few greeted me politely. Vanessa watched all of it with a controlled smile. But when her gaze dropped to the black portfolio in my hand, something changed. She recognized the look of a man carrying more than embarrassment. Preston began before anyone asked him to. "Since Daniel is here, I assume we're indulging Lydia's concerns about routine vendor confusion." He smiled at the board as if inviting them to share his exhaustion. "I want to be clear that this project has already been corrected, and dragging old paperwork into a planning meeting feels counterproductive. Vanessa added softly. Especially when emotions from unrelated personal history may be clouding judgment. The room went quiet. There it was. Clean and poisonous. She had placed my divorce on the table before I placed a single document. The old Daniel might have defended himself first. The old Daniel might have said, "That's not fair." Instead, I opened the portfolio and looked at Elaine Hart. "Would you like me to address the project file only?" I asked. Elaine studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Yes. Mr. Mercer. The project file only." I placed the first timeline on the table and slid it forward. "Then I'll keep it simple." Vanessa's smile faded by one careful inch. Preston shifted beside her. Lydia sat across from me. Hands folded. Eyes steady. I could feel the whole room deciding whether I was a bitter ex-husband or a professional with documentation. That was the narrow bridge I had to cross. Not with anger. Not with revenge. With dates. I started with the original estimate. Then the revised vendor package. Then the duplicate outreach charges hidden beneath Ashford Civic's subcontract line. I did not mention Vanessa. I did not mention the gala. I did not mention the midnight text. I let the numbers speak first. The board members leaned in. One asked about timestamps. Another asked who requested the vendor substitution. I turned one page and read the email line exactly as written. "Preston said this can be smoothed out before board review." Preston laughed. But it was too quick. That's being taken wildly out of context. I looked at him then. Not with anger, but with the strange peace that comes when the truth has finally entered the room and does not need your body to carry all its weight. Elaine Hart's face had gone pale. Vanessa's fingers tightened around the edge of her chair. And Lydia, who had been silent the entire time, reached into her tote and pulled out a second folder. Lydia's second folder changed the temperature in the room before anyone knew what was inside it. She did not open it right away. She placed it beside my timeline, aligned the edges with 2 fingers, and looked at her mother. "Before Preston explains context," she said, "the board should see the outreach proposal Vanessa sent last week." Vanessa blinked once. It was small, but I saw it. I had spent years watching her recover from being surprised. She always started with the eyes. Elaine Hart turned toward Vanessa slowly. "You submitted a proposal," Vanessa's smile returned. Thinner now. "An informal concept deck," she said. "Preston asked me to think creatively about community engagement for the benefit." Preston jumped in. "Which is completely normal. We're exploring options." Lydia opened the folder. "The file was not sent to the trust," she said. "It was sent to Northline Strategic Media, with Ashford Civic listed as a community activation partner and a proposed budget line connected to Riverside outreach funds." For the first time, Preston did not have an immediate sentence. Lydia slid copies across the table. The pages were clean, branded, expensive looking. Vanessa's style was all over them, warm language, polished headings, photographs of smiling residents she had no permission to use. I recognized one building, rendering from our project model. It had been pulled from a donor packet, not a public site. Vanessa had taken the work of people she had mocked, dressed it in soft colors, and offered it as her entry ticket. A board member named Mr. Alvarez adjusted his glasses. "Ms. Cole, how did you access internal project visuals?" Vanessa looked insulted by the question. "I was given materials as part of benefit planning." Lydia's voice stayed level. "There was no approved benefit planning committee." Preston leaned forward. "Lydia. Enough. You're making this personal." That was the word people used when facts began pointing at them. "Personal. As if the truth became less true when it hurt someone you knew." Vanessa turned toward me then. Because she understood the board better than Preston did. She knew numbers were dangerous. But emotion could be useful. "Daniel," she said softly, "I'm sorry our history has made this uncomfortable for you. But involving yourself in my professional life because I moved on is not healthy." There was a little intake of breath somewhere down the table. She had played the card cleanly, bitter ex-husband. Jealous man. Wounded pride. The old story. Retold in a nicer room. I looked at Elaine. Not Vanessa. May I respond to that only as it relates to the project file? Elaine nodded. My hands were steady when I opened the last section of my portfolio. Ms. Cole contacted me after the gala and referenced my relationship with Ms. Hart. Preston Hart also contacted me and told me to stay out of family business. I included those messages only because both relate to attempts to discourage project documentation from being reviewed. I placed the screenshots beside the vendor timeline. No dramatic reading. No raised voice. Just dates. Times. Names. And words they had chosen when they believed I would absorb them privately. Vanessa's texts looked different in black and white. Smaller. Meaner. Less elegant without her voice smoothing the edges. Preston's midnight message sat there too. Plain as a fingerprint, stay away from my sister. And stay out of family business. Preston's face flushed. This is ridiculous. A private text between men doesn't prove anything. Lydia turned to him. You weren't texting him as a man. You were texting a project consultant who had documentation you didn't want reviewed. Elaine closed her eyes for 1 second. And when she opened them, she looked older. Not weak. Just older in the way parents look when their child's character stops being a theory. Vanessa tried to recover. I was protecting Lydia, she said. Daniel has a pattern of attaching himself to women who make him feel important. It was the same insult in a new dress. Before Lydia could answer. I did something I had not done in the restaurant years earlier. I looked directly at Vanessa and said, no. You don't get to diagnose loyalty as damage just because you learned how to profit from it. My voice did not shake. That surprised both of us. The room went completely still. I did not continue. I did not make a speech about our marriage. Her affairs. The night she left. Or the years she spent turning me into a cautionary tale. I had once imagined saying everything if I ever got the chance. But when the chance came, most of it felt too valuable to hand back to her. So I stopped after 1 sentence and returned to the documents. That was the moment I knew I had changed. Mr. Alvarez tapped the proposal page. This budget assumes access to funds that have not been authorized. Another board member added. And it routes through a vendor previously removed for questionable billing. Elaine looked at Preston. Did you encourage Northline or Ashford to expect reinstatement? Preston's jaw worked. I made introductions. That's all. Lydia opened another page. Grant Bell wrote to Northline 2 days ago that Preston had family alignment and that Vanessa would smooth the optics once the benefit was announced. Family alignment. Smooth the optics. The language Vanessa loved had turned around and bitten the table. She stared at the paper like it had betrayed her personally. Preston stood abruptly. This is being blown out of proportion, he said. We're talking about a benefit event. Not a crime. Elaine's voice cut through the room. Quiet but final. Sit down. Preston. He did. Not because he agreed. But because even men like him know when their mother's public patience has ended. Elaine asked everyone except board members. Lydia. And me, to wait outside, while they entered executive discussion. Vanessa hesitated. Clearly expecting Preston to insist she stay. He did not. That told me something about the engagement already. Image couples are very loyal until the image catches fire. Vanessa gathered her purse. Walked past me. And paused just close enough to whisper. You must be proud. I looked at her once. No. I said. Just finished. In the hallway? Vanessa paced near the windows while Preston took a call 20 feet away with his back turned. I stood by the elevator with the empty quiet of a man who had survived a storm and was waiting to see what it had damaged. Vanessa finally stopped in front of me. Without the board watching, her face changed. You think Lydia's different? She asked. She's a heart. When this becomes inconvenient, she'll choose them. I looked through the glass at the river below. Maybe. But I'm done choosing people who require me to disappear first. She laughed. But it had no music in it. You weren't like this when we were married. That one almost made me smile. I was. I said. You just didn't notice unless I was useful. She had no answer for that. For years, I had believed closure would come when Vanessa finally understood what she had done. Standing there, I realized closure had nothing to do with her understanding. It came from me no longer needing her to. The board called us back in after 40 minutes. Elaine spoke first. Not as a mother, but as chair. The trust would suspend all outside communications proposals connected to the benefit. Northline and Ashford would remain barred from project work pending independent review. Preston would step back from procurement discussions and donor-vendor introductions. Vanessa would have no role in Riverside Housing Trust activities. The engagement celebration could not be presented as a trust benefit. Each sentence landed with the clean sound of a door closing. Preston argued until Elaine said his name once. Vanessa sat perfectly still. But the color had drained from her face. She had come into the gala with a diamond and a future, intending to show me I was still behind her. Now the room she had tried to enter had locked itself from the inside. No police arrived. No one screamed. There was no cinematic confession. Just consequences, which are sometimes quieter and far more permanent. When the meeting ended, Lydia walked with me to the elevators. Preston did not look at either of us. Vanessa did. Though, she looked at Lydia's hand, slipping into mine. And for a moment I saw the same panic from the gala, only stripped of surprise. She understood now that Lydia had not kissed my cheek to perform a rebellion. She had done it because she knew who I was before Vanessa's version of me reached the room. In the elevator, Lydia let out a breath that sounded like it had been waiting years. I'm sorry, she said. I turned to her. For what? She looked at the closed doors. For my family being exactly what I warned you they could be. I squeezed her hand. Your family didn't save me and they didn't ruin me. She looked at me then. I said. You stood beside me. That was enough. The fallout was not dramatic in the way strangers prefer. Preston and Vanessa did not break up that afternoon. But the engagement announcement disappeared from the society page within 2 days. A week later, Marcus sent me a screenshot of Vanessa's agency quietly removing Riverside Partnership strategy from its upcoming work samples. A month later, Lydia told me Preston had taken a temporary leave from 2 foundation committees. Temporary is a word wealthy families use when permanent would embarrass them. Vanessa texted me once after that. I hope humiliating me helped you heal. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Not archived. Not saved. Deleted. There was no evidence to preserve anymore because I was not building a case against her. I was building a life without her voice in it. That was harder than revenge, and much less satisfying to explain. But it was cleaner. Lydia and I kept seeing each other. Carefully at first. Then openly. We had arguments. Real ones. About work. Privacy. Family boundaries. And whether my apartment above the pharmacy was charming or simply loud. She never asked me to become someone shinier. I never asked her to prove she was not her last name. We learned each other slowly. The way people do when they understand love is not a rescue mission. It is a place where both people can stand upright. Months later, the Riverside project opened its first restored building. I stood on the sidewalk watching families walk through freshly painted doors. Children racing toward rooms that still smelled like new wood and clean heat. A donor asked me where the original porch railings had gone. And I told him Lydia had been right about safer replacements. She heard me say it and smiled from across the walkway. I smiled back. Being wrong about railings had become one of my favorite memories. Near the end of the ceremony, Vanessa appeared across the street. Alone. No Preston. No diamond visible from where I stood. No careful circle of admirers around her. She did not come over. She just watched for a minute. Maybe 2. I expected to feel triumph. Instead, I felt a quiet distance. Like seeing a house you once lived in after someone else painted the door. It had mattered. It did not belong to me anymore. Lydia came up beside me and slipped her hand through my arm. You okay? She asked. I looked at Vanessa one last time. Then at the building. The porch. The families. The people who would live inside something we had helped protect. Yeah, I said. I think I am. Vanessa turned and walked away before the ribbon was cut. For once. I did not watch to see if she looked back. People think the most satisfying revenge is watching someone fall apart in public. Sometimes it is. But the deeper victory is quieter. It is standing in a room where your name was once used as a joke and realizing you no longer need to correct the people who laughed. It is having proof and choosing precision instead of rage. It is understanding that silence was never weakness when it was protecting your peace. But it becomes dangerous when it protects someone else's lie. I used to believe love meant being chosen loudly enough to erase the times you were discarded. I don't believe that anymore. Love is not a microphone. It is not a diamond held up under chandeliers or a polished announcement in front of donors. Love is the hand that reaches for yours when the room turns ugly. It is the person who does not need your humiliation explained before deciding it matters. Family is not always blood. And reputation is not always truth. Some people build their lives out of appearances and call it ambition. Some people mistake kindness for weakness because kindness once let them get away with more than they deserved. But every quiet person has a line. And when that line is crossed, they do not have to become cruel to become free. They only have to stop cooperating with the story that kept them small. That night at the gala, Vanessa brought her new fiancé to taunt me because she thought I was still the man she had left behind. She thought my silence meant I had nothing. She thought the room would believe her version because rooms like that usually did. Then his sister walked over, kissed my cheek, and asked if I was ready to go. She had no idea I had been ready for years. For years. I thought being quiet meant I had lost. I thought dignity was just another word for swallowing pain while other people rewrote the truth. But that night taught me something different. Silence is only weakness when it protects the people who hurt you. When it protects your peace, it becomes strength. Vanessa brought her new fiancé to prove I was nothing without her. In the end, all she proved was that I had finally become someone she could no longer control.